homeschool high school graduate to introduce to you. Jennifer Hatton is a homeschool graduate, but not only is she a homeschool graduate, she actually has homeschooled and graduated her first teen. Jennifer, hello and welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited for you to be here. Can you share about your personal homeschool journey? What did that look like? What year did you graduate? And what did life look like after you graduated?
Okay, well, I started homeschooling in 6th grade. I had been, there was a girl at church that homeschooled a family, and I just thought it sounded really interesting and fun. And I begged my parents, and my dad said no. And we joked that he came to a class party and got hit with food a couple of times and realized that maybe it wasn't like the best learning environment and that we could try this homeschooling thing. And so in 6th grade, our school was getting split into 2 middle schools. So my parents were like, this is a good time, a good transition. And so I started homeschooling and I really loved it. I'm the oldest of 4 and now 6 kids in my family, and my siblings all had different journeys of like private school or public school. The youngest didn't go to any, he just homeschooled. But I really enjoyed it. I graduated 2 weeks after I turned 17 and went on to college. And I think that my parents probably went a little overboard because they felt like the spotlight was on them, and our extended family was very unsure about homeschooling. And so they had me kind of in all the activities and all the things, but they kind of calmed a little as they went. I don't think it was really sustainable.
So what year did you graduate?
I graduated in 97. I have to think about that.
I know, it is so funny. Like every time I ask somebody what they graduated, they always have to think like, yes, when did I graduate? And so I think it's important for people that, especially that are listening, is that the 90s is kind of the beginning of the homeschool movement started in the late 1970s. So you're fairly part of the new modern homeschool movement by graduating in the 90s. And so it looks different now than it did back then. And so, you already have mentioned the pressure that was on you being the oldest, being the new homeschooler. And so what did that translate when you moved on? You went on to college.
Yes.
And then what did you do at college?
So I went to a 2-year like community college first, just got a general associates in science. And then I moved on to a 4-year state school and got a bachelor's of science with a minor in community health education and nonprofit management.
Wow. And how did that lead you into what you're doing now?
It's completely unrelated.
Oh,
so okay. except for the medical clients that I work with. When I first went to school, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And there really wasn't, you talk about the kind of the changes, is we were really the only homeschoolers that I knew at the time that weren't doing it for religious reasons. Mm-hmm. The majority of the people around us were, and there was, just only a few curriculums that people used. And there still wasn't a great process even of how, at least in Texas where I'm from, that a homeschooler got into college. And so I had worked at actually a homeschool curriculum store. San Antonio had a pretty big collection of homeschoolers. They had organized basketball teams and things, which I did not do sports. I was a piano player. I did 4-H and public speaking and Toastmasters. So I didn't do sports, but there was a lot of opportunity there. Mm-hmm. But because of working in that, I could quote the laws from memory. And so I remember going to the local community college, and they were like, well, we don't know what to do with you. And so they gave me all the college entrance exams. And I distinctly remember telling them in Texas, blah, blah, blah. I had my transcript, and I remember hearing the counselor arguing with the guy who's like, just let her in, just let her in. And so they let me enroll for like my first thing, and I ended up doing great. I made a 4.0 my first semester and ended up being part of a group that went in front of the Texas legislature to talk about the rules, because at that time, homeschoolers were required to have higher test scores than public schoolers to enter college. And so it was kind of fun to be interviewed about my experience and what I thought about it. And I don't know, to me, it wasn't, I mean, it was college. It was obviously different than being at home or being in co-ops, but it wasn't the scary, like life-changing thing. I remember a kid at school asking me, so what is it like to be around people? And I'm like, my parents had me in way too many activities around people. But I picked science just because I thought it was interesting. And then when I moved over, I was kind of interested in doing pre-med, and I just loved the science piece. I liked the classes. And then somebody actually approached me and asked me to do a nonprofit class because they needed one more person for the class to make. And I fell in love with the nonprofit world. And so it was just some extra classes that I could take to get that minor. And I really loved it because I learned about fundraising and marketing. And it was just a very cool class, and helped me support some of the like causes that I was interested in throughout my life. And as soon as I graduated, well, while I was still in school, one of my professors worked at the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio, which is the medical school. And he asked me to come in to interview for an internship, and I ended up getting a job. And so I worked in research there. I did HIV and AIDS education research, prevention research. And I absolutely loved it. I learned a lot. I got to work with a really incredible group of women that were my age. And we were given really great responsibility. And you don't usually see that in your first job. You're like filing papers, and we were writing assessments and doing all kinds of stuff. I became the specialist for the IRB, which is the review board. Before you do any type of research study, you have to have all of the permissions and talk about what the things could happen to the participants. And that became kind of my specialty. So I really was very fortunate to have a really great experience right out of college. But from there, I jumped to a nonprofit that was also doing prevention research. And then I switched over to a consulting company that evaluated government funded projects for like health and education. HIV was still one of my specialties. And then once I had my son and I kind of moved around, I decided to do something completely different. And I got into special events. And that was something that I had done a lot for nonprofits that I had worked with. And so I got to work on special events for the city of San Antonio, which was super neat, doing street fairs and things like that. And then I started working with Morgan's Wonderland, which is the first amusement park in the world that was built with special needs in mind. Everything in the park is wheelchair accessible. It's just absolutely incredible, the first in the world to be done. And so I started doing social for that project and running their Facebook and their Twitter. And that was before Instagram, and ended up loving it and started consulting from there. I had my second child and needed to do something that was more part-time. And it just kind of developed from there. It was more a person being like, hey, I had a really amazing woman who said, hey, I'm starting a company. Why don't you come and help me and consult? And then here, almost 11 years later, I am doing this for businesses and running it from my home. So it was kind of a journey of adapting, but that's something that homeschooling set me up for, is learning to adapt.
I was just going to ask you that question. How did you feel that homeschooling prepared you for all of that? And so could you just expand on that a little bit more? Like, what do you mean that it helped you adapt?
So when I was homeschooling, I was the oldest, obviously. My siblings and I are very spread out. My youngest brother is 13 years younger than me. And now I actually have 15-year-old twin sisters, but they didn't come into the house until after I was married and gone. So having that big spread, my mom was obviously busy changing diapers and doing things, like she couldn't sit with me. And so I actually did a lot of my planning of sitting and saying, okay, I have to finish this book by this day. So this is how many pages I need to do, like planning it out and learning to be a self-starter. And that really showed up in college, is that, they, at the beginning of the semester, the professor's like, you have this big project due by the end of the semester. And I feel like, compared to a lot of the students that I was with, is I was better prepared to be a self-starter because I was used to doing those things on my own. And where they came from, public and private schools, that laid out the project for them, like, you need to have your rough draft by this day and this day. And they probably struggled a little bit more. It does not mean that I'm not still a procrastinator and that I don't do great under the pressure of doing things last minute, but I feel like I adjusted to the classwork and the projects because I was already used to doing a lot of that on my own and working with different types. I had a tutor for this. I went to 4-H for public speaking. I had a private piano teacher. So I was already used to working with in different systems instead of just one. And so I feel like my transition to college was really pretty easy. I really liked college.
Oh, that's good. It sounds like that your parents gave you a lot of freedom to be able to do that. It sounds like your mom said, kind of, here, make it work. Not that you were on your own, but she helped you in the long run by allowing you to figure out what you needed to get accomplished.
Yes. And I think
with that, I think it's really important to talk about, like, where do you feel that homeschooling failed you? Even though that you've been very successful, you're married, you're homeschooled, do you feel there was any part of your homeschool experience that was kind of didn't work well for you or didn't prepare you for something?
Well, something I still complain to my mom about this day is that she made me do all the questions and all the pages. And I was like, Mom, I've been to public school. They at least let you do the evens or odds sometimes. But she was very concerned about, doing a good job or us not being prepared. And so I think that I probably did a little too many activities, and some of it is personality based. Like, my siblings are all amazing and so different, but I was definitely the one that was like, I want to be in this and I want to sign up for this. And so I think I tell her, like, I wish I could have not been stuck to curriculum so tightly. But also, there were definitely gaps. Like, when I went to college and people would be talking about like popular shows or movies, we didn't really watch a lot of that. So I kind of just had to sit still because there's a lot of pop culture or things that I didn't know. But I don't think that there's really anything my parents could have done about it. I also think, there were gaps as far as, like, I did not know the European countries. Like, if you asked me, like, Britain, Europe at that time, I didn't know. But it still kind of goes back to me, is that I knew how to learn. My mom had taught us, how to go to the library, how to go to tutors and ask for help. And because of that, I was able to overcome anything because I wanted to learn and I knew how to ask for help. I feel like it helped me overcome. And I know that that helps me in my own homeschool journey, because sometimes I stress out, like, I'm not getting everything, all the information into my kids, and trying to step back and breathe and say, as long as if they really want to know something, if they have that kind of go-getter mentality and they want it and they're a self-starter and they know how to ask for help, that they'll be okay. And that kind of helps me breathe through the wanting to get all of the information into them, and recognizing too that now the internet, they can Google anything that they need to know.
And you are an interesting person. There are a couple of people that I'm interviewing that are actually homeschooling and chose to homeschool their children. So I am probably thinking that your mom's really excited that you homeschooled your own children, because in a way, us parents, we feel like, oh, our kids don't think we messed them up. They're homeschooling their own children. Did you ever have that conversation with your mom?
I don't know that I've ever talked to her. She knew that my oldest really wanted to homeschool. We didn't start homeschooling him until 5th grade. And she's been there to kind of talk to me about things. She's obviously very supportive of it. But I definitely am a different homeschooler than she was, but she has just seen with each of my kids how very, very different they are and is very supportive. And I think she also sees how different each of them are, we're able to adapt. Like, for example, my middle one has severe dyslexia, and we were told when he was tested that homeschooling would be a great fit for him so that we could adapt easier for him. He does a virtual tutor with a language specialist through Children's Hospital of Colorado. And my mom is just like, this is so cool to see how far it's come, because I have a brother with dyslexia and there really wasn't resources. And so she's really excited to see all the co-ops and classes and OutSchool and all these different options that are available to my kids now that weren't available back when she was homeschooling.
It is amazing to see, and in your position, because you lived the life of a homeschooler and then you're a homeschool parent. I've been homeschooling for 32 years. And so it's that same feeling of when I hear you talk about your first approach to the college and that you had to stand your ground and say, I'm here, you're going to have to deal with me. Here's the laws. That was the same thing that our family had to experience with my oldest daughter. That now my youngest is graduating this year. And they walk into the college and the colleges have a special section just for homeschoolers now.
You're actually actively recruiting them. It's amazing.
Yes. And so everybody in Texas needs to thank you because there had to be this point in time where homeschoolers, it was more of an identity, I feel, for our older homeschoolers, graduates, because it was so out of the box. It was so different. It was about homeschooling. It was about educational reform. And so back in the 90s, there was this push for it to be educational reform, but then box curriculums and all of these things happened to the homeschooling movement during that time that we're still paying the cost for it now with school at home and that hard push to check every assignment and do every little detail. And so it's kind of fun to hear you say that you're a totally different homeschooler, even though that you live this life of a more of a traditional, let's do everything and check off every box, to true educational reform, where your mom adapted to that as she was going on in the homeschooling movement, because it just became easier to be more adaptive and more resources out there.
Yeah, and I don't think she realized that there was any that you could do it differently. Like, we weren't exposed to,
right.
It was basically school at home, but she obviously added in a lot of extracurriculars and things. But I honestly didn't know anybody that did something different. Like, unschooling wasn't something that I heard of, or game schooling or fun schooling. Like, these are all new things.
Yeah.
That, I think she was so concerned about messing us up that she, she's also a rule follower. I think that comes down to personality, is like, she wanted to follow the rules and check the boxes and make sure that we had everything that we needed. And I struggle with that as a firstborn as well. But I also have kids that are so quirky and unique that they have forced me to be outside of the box. And it's a really fun place to be.
And thinking outside the box, it doesn't mean that you're not checking off everything that you need to cover, because we're talking about high school, right? And it's so nerve-wracking. You've experienced it as a homeschooler, and then as a mom, you're still, as the mom brain, you're going, okay, I need to make sure that I'm meeting my state law requirements. I want to be that flexible person, and I just need to be able to capture all of that and put it on paper for a transcript, right? Yes. And so it's wonderful that the homeschool movement has moved to the ability to see that that we can do homeschooling differently, and it's still checking all the boxes.
Yes. And also that you don't have to be the best at everything. I think as parents, we don't want to fail our kids. And that's something I learned with my oldest. I signed him up in high school for some local co-ops. And I remember after his first semester being like, why have I not been doing this all along? This is amazing because, I can sign him up for this mom who has a degree in algebra and is amazing at it. And I don't have to remember algebra. Like, he can go and get this and get the best of the best, but I don't have to be the best at that. And the same with like poetry and some of the English stuff is just really not my jam. Like science, anatomy, communications, like I'm completely there. But I signed him up for a poetry class. I signed him up for, English, and just being able to connect him with other kids, but also with somebody who is an expert in that area, that I don't have to be all of the things. I can find someone who is really great at that and they can help my kid.
I think that's a great advice to give to a homeschool parent can you just repeat that one more time? Because it's really the best advice.
Yeah, you don't have to be all of the things. You don't have to be an expert in all the areas. And honestly, that's something that my very first, that professor that brought me in for the internship back in the day, he told me, I don't expect you to be the expert. I expect you to know who is the expert and bring them in. And that is how he taught me project management back then, was that I didn't have to be the expert, but I needed to be able to find the person who was. And I think that there's, that like build up the areas that you're not strong in, or focus on the areas that you're strong in. And so as a parent, I think thinking about those areas that you enjoy teaching and that you love teaching, and then outsource the stuff that you do not enjoy or that you struggle with. And you might find that your kids are really strong in those areas, but I think taking that guilt and that stress off of trying to be all the things, because you can't be all the things.
No, because even at the high school level, they have different teachers for each subject.
Yes, they do.
And that burden that you think you're going to fail, like you can, unless you're a genius and you're good at every subject, it's really a false sense of pride to think that you can do it all. And if there is some humility to say, you know what, to your kids, right? Like, I can't do this all, but I'm going to teach you how to look. And I'm going to teach you how to learn. And so can you give us some suggestions of who to look for experts, like to your friends, like who have you used in your experience to bring into your home?
There's obviously even more options now. My son graduated 4 years ago. So we looked into local co-ops and kind of were able to pick and choose. And there were quite a few subject experts that had, like a bachelor's in math or a bachelor's in English, or they were an author. And so at the time we did a lot of local where, like you'd go to one on Tuesday, Thursday, and another was like Wednesday, and just kind of mixed in our schedule. But now there's just so many more options of online tutoring and help. And so I think that opens up our world. And so I would say reaching out, being involved. One area I find a lot is there's so many online homeschool groups, especially on Facebook. There's religious ones, there's secular ones, there's just so many. And you can ask that question of, hey, I need somebody to teach geometry, or I need somebody that really enjoys learning about the Odyssey. And you'll get so many suggestions, and you can kind of work through. I think also knowing what type of learner your child is really helpful. Do they learn best by reading? Do they learn best by auditory? I have an auditory learner, and I don't know if it's considered a full photographic memory, but if I read something in a textbook when I'm taking a test, I can look back and remember where it is on the page. Yeah. And so, for me, just being able, I could scan and read really quickly, and that's the way that I learned. So knowing how your learner works and then trying to match that, and just really asking for help. I think that is the biggest thing, is not feeling like you have to do it all yourself or know all the answers, is asking for help, asking for people's ideas and suggestions and things that they've done, and not feeling like you should know it all. It applies to all of it, because, me reaching out and saying, hey, what experiences have your kids had? I had a few moms with kids a little bit older than mine that really helped me to navigate those high school years. And also, like to do dual credit. You can do dual credit with the local community college in Texas. And my son took college classes in high school. And I knew that because I asked, and another mom in my co-op had taken her older children through it and walked me through how to do it, encouraged me that, and kind of calmed my fears about it. And it was a great experience. So there's so many other homeschoolers to ask questions. I think that parents should feel like they can reach out and outsource.
Yes, that is great advice. I do appreciate you being here and sharing all of your tips. And congratulations on graduating your own high schooler.
Thank you.
Everybody's like, oh, she graduated high school from homeschooling and she's graduated a teen. Like, that's amazing.
They will survive. It will be okay. Yes. It doesn't mean that I'm not still nervous about my next two. Like, am I going to ruin one of my children? But having one out in the world who is paying his own bills and he's a really great person, he's fun to be around and he's kind, getting to see where he decides to go with his future is exciting. And so I would say just hang in there. You can do it and try to enjoy the ride because it goes really fast.
Yes. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.